The first time I heard the name One Punch Man, I thought it sounded ridiculous because I hadn't seen Saitama. I didn't understand the joke, and I knew absolutely nothing about the story. All I could picture was an entire anime about some guy who punches everything once, which didn't exactly sound like something that could keep me interested for very long. Apparently, the name was ridiculous enough to make me curious anyway, because I searched for it. And somewhere between laughing at this bald guy in a yellow suit and realizing the fights were way better than I expected, I stopped caring about how stupid the premise sounded and became completely invested. Saitama was one of those characters I liked almost immediately, which is strange, because, on paper, he should have been incredibly boring. He's so strong that the question usually isn't whether he's going to win, it's how long the story can keep him away before he arrives and ends everything. Somehow, knowing that never made me enjoy him less. When I was younger, insanely powerful characters were already cool to me, so obviously watching Saitama destroy things that everyone else could barely scratch was part of the appeal. But what made him stay with me was how little he behaved like someone who knew he was basically untouchable. He didn't constantly demand respect or search for opportunities to remind weaker people where they stood, and even when somebody completely underestimated him, he rarely seemed desperate to prove them wrong. For someone who could settle almost any argument simply by showing how absurdly strong he was, he seemed strangely comfortable not doing it. I probably didn't think about any of that consciously when I first watched the anime. I would have just said Saitama was funny, ridiculously strong, and somehow still likable. Looking back now, though, I think that lack of arrogance mattered more than I realized, because he had enough power to make everything about himself, and most of the time, he simply didn't. Even when he wasn't given the recognition he deserved, doing the right thing didn't suddenly become pointless to him, and I liked that long before I had the words to explain why. The strongest guy in the room didn't seem to need everyone else to know he was the strongest guy in the room. The funny part is that some of my strongest memories from One Punch Man aren't even Saitama throwing the final punch. They're the fights before he gets there. Especially those moments when Genos suddenly makes the anime feel like a completely different show. Watching Dino's fight was just cool to me. The speed and destruction made his battles feel huge, while the enemies he faced could suddenly seem genuinely terrifying. Somehow that tension still worked, even though Saitama existed somewhere in the same world, because while Genos was fighting, I wasn't thinking about the human cheat code who could eventually solve everything. I was completely caught up in what was happening right there. Then Saitama would finally appear, and instead of making everything that came before feel pointless, the difference made his arrival even more satisfying. You had just spent several minutes watching somebody struggle against a threat that felt overwhelming. Then this completely unimpressed bald man walked into the exact same situation and reminded you that the scale had been broken from the beginning. I don't remember every opponent anymore, and I definitely couldn't reconstruct a whole season episode by episode without checking, but I remember that feeling clearly, waiting for Saitama to finally arrive while everybody else was desperately trying to survive. One scene survived that memory loss better than almost anything else, and Saitama isn't even the reason it works. Mumen Rider standing against the Deep Sea King got me even when I was younger, because there wasn't some hidden transformation waiting for him, and there was no believable path where he suddenly became powerful enough to win. The difference between them was obvious. He knew it, we knew it, and he still stood there because somebody had to. That made Saitama's arrival feel different, because Mumen Rider didn't need to defeat the Deep Sea King for what he did to matter. He only needed to keep standing for as long as he possibly could. Then eventually, the person who actually had the power to end the fight arrived. I think that's part of why One Punch Man worked so well for me, despite having a protagonist who was almost impossible to threaten, because the show could make something impressive without making it powerful. Sometimes, a guy riding a bicycle into a fight he has absolutely no business winning can feel just as heroic as the guy who eventually ends that fight with one punch. As a kid, obviously, I wasn't sitting there analyzing any of that. I just really wanted Mumen Rider to get back up. Then, One Punch Man did something that ended up affecting me a little more directly. It gave Saitama a workout routine. 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats every day, plus the 10-kilometer run and all the other insanity attached to his explanation. The entire joke is that this incredibly ordinary training routine is presented as the reason a normal man became powerful enough to destroy monsters with one punch. And even when I was younger, I understood that it was obviously exaggerated. I didn't genuinely believe I was going to wake up one morning capable of punching a mountain apart. I knew I was watching a gag in an anime, but I still started doing the exercises. I began doing 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, and 100 squats every day. And while I definitely wasn't recreating every miserable part of Saitama's routine, those 3 numbers were simple enough to remember and just ridiculous enough to feel like a challenge. At first, I don't think it needed to be any deeper than that. I liked Saitama. His training sounded cool, and when you're young, sometimes that's enough motivation to make you get on the floor and start doing push-ups. I didn't need an optimized program, a spreadsheet, or some carefully designed fitness plan. A bald anime character claimed this was how he became unstoppable, and apparently that was good enough for me. You'd expect something like that to disappear after a week or two, because I've definitely had plenty of moments where something motivates me for a few days, then gradually fades once the excitement disappears. Somehow, this one never completely went away. The exact routine changed over time. I changed too. And I'm obviously not going to pretend every workout I've done since then exists because of One Punch Man. Still, push-ups, sit-ups, and squats kept finding their way back into my life until, at some point, they stopped feeling like exercises I was copying from an anime character and simply became exercises I naturally did. That's probably the strangest legacy the series could have left me with. Because I clicked on One Punch Man after deciding its name sounded stupid. Years later, I'm still doing exercises I originally started because Saitama gave Genos one of the least convincing explanations for superhuman strength imaginable. There is one part of the routine that concerns me a little, though. As I've gotten older, my hair has started getting a little thinner, and I'd like to believe this has absolutely nothing to do with age or genetics. Maybe the Saitama training has simply been working extremely slowly, and I'm finally approaching the next stage. Unfortunately, I've completely changed my mind about that particular part of the transformation, because these days I'd actually prefer to grow my hair as long as possible. My relationship with One Punch Man didn't stay that intense forever, and when Season 2 arrived, it simply didn't hit me in the same way. Maybe part of that was me changing, and part of it was that the season itself felt different from the experience I remembered, but I never found that exact excitement again. The feeling I had when I first discovered Saitama, Dinos, and the rest of that world. Eventually, I just drifted away from the series. I haven't read the manga, and I haven't watched Season 3, so I'm definitely not going to pretend I've followed everything One Punch Man has done since those earlier seasons. Strangely, that doesn't make the original experience feel any less important to me. Some series keep you attached because you need to know what happens next for years, while others seem to find you at exactly the right moment in your life, give you something you needed or something you didn't even realize would stay with you. Then eventually, you move on. For me, One Punch Man became the second kind. I don't remember every fight anymore. I couldn't name every monster Saitama punched, and I'm sure if I watched the first season again today, I'd constantly run into scenes I'd completely forgotten. But I remember being younger and thinking Genos was unbelievably cool. I remember waiting for Saitama to appear while everyone else was struggling, and I remember Mumen Rider refusing to stay down when there was absolutely no logical reason for him to keep fighting. More strangely than any of that, I can trace one very simple habit in my actual life back to the moment Saitama explained his training. Something that was written as a joke got me to exercise. Then, part of that habit somehow survived long after the excitement around the anime itself faded. One Punch Man obviously didn't turn me into Saitama. And considering what's happening with my hair, I'm hoping the transformation stops well before that point. But all these years later, I still do the push-ups. For an anime I originally watched because its name sounded ridiculous. That's a pretty good punchline.